Yeah, we actually have 5 minutes, so.
Okay. Yeah. Send your request quick.
Okay. Okay, there we go. That's you and I now. We're now live on Facebook.
Oh, very cool. I want to say hello, everybody in Radio Land, but
Yeah.
we're beyond that now.
We'll get the chance in a couple minutes.
All right.
And there is a volume. You'll see this is plugged in, and next to where it's plugged in is a little volume knob.
Oh, there it is.
Like an in and an outer, bigger and a small knob. And I think the microphone probably, but it gets louder when you're on the radio. When we're on, so it may not be as loud right now. But.
Okay. Let the nurse know that would be you. There we go.
Yes. Okay. Oh, request. There you are. Done. Accepted.
All right. Now I should be able to link you pretty easily.
Yeah.
Fed might raise interest rates, and we'll know in an hour. Okay, let's check mics.
All right.
No reason to get there. You go. Another reason for me to not buy a house right now. Yes.
Well, values are gonna keep going up. But the problem, well, if you can wait, if you're fine waiting, I heard 2021 is one thing. Someone the other day said 2021.
I gotta say, the main impetus right now, I want a dog that can run around the backyard. So if I
That's
can
a
wait
good
3
call.
years for a dog,
Yeah.
I think we'll be all right.
Yeah.
Oh shoot, you're not coming up for some reason. Maybe it's just too.
All right, Jared. Test. 1, 2, 3.
Yep, good here, good.
Just do the mic check.
Oh, test. 1, 2, 1, 2.
5 minutes. 5 seconds.
5 minutes and 5 seconds. All right. I might try this one more time.
Okay. Let's see. So do you teach like certain what level classes or what?
So it's mostly undergrad. Actually, it's purely undergrad because the JCs only do undergrad stuff. Mostly
Okay.
just kind of preparatory to get you into a transfer.
Gotcha.
But also a couple at Sac State, I have a couple of upper division classes. So you get some students who are a little more seasoned and have been through a few college classes and kind of know what the game's all about at that point. But my bread and butter is definitely introductory psychology. I teach that as many as 4 times per semester. So that one's really what actually pays the bills. And then I'll be happy to talk like which classes I do as well.
Yeah,
which ones
sure.
I like the most. It's a wide variety. In fact, I even teach child psychology, despite having never had a child myself. But it's fascinating just in the theory of how children work and how they are essentially like little adults, or rather, I would say adults are just overgrown children, really.
Yeah, that sounds to be more.
Yeah.
I could see that for sure. And some are not. Well, yeah, they're physically overgrown.
If physically overgrown, sometimes even mentally overgrown too. Because really, you start pulling away all the layers, you'll still see that child somewher in there.
Yeah.
He just learned a lot more lessons.
I guess that's what I was thinking. Is it?
Yeah, he's a more seasoned child.
Adults still act like children.
Ugh. Especially with social media, we have so many avenues to do that now.
Right?
Mm-hmm. I try to remind people, I don't think we're not getting stupider. We're just seeing more instances of it online.
Oh my God.
People have more opportunities to display their childishness and stupidity.
Yeah.
So the world's not doomed.
Good. That's good to know.
Yes.
That's
Don't worry, you did not invite a nihilist onto your show.
That's good to know. I'm trying to find this book.
I'm having a hard time finding you. For some reason, I can't link you on there. I don't know if it's because they're just too recently newly
weird.
friended. Yeah. And the show itself doesn't have a page, does it?
It does, but I don't record live from the show's page. I do it from my page, and then I push it over to the show's page afterwards.
Okay.
I don't know if Facebook is capable of having 2 at a time. I don't think so. I've not been able to post it, run it live on both my page and the Beyond Members page. It's just on my page. So.
Okay. I'll just let people know who you are. Maybe you'll
Yeah.
find some new friends today.
Yeah. As long, as long as they're good people, not affiliated with any.
No, don't worry.
What's the,
Unseemly organizations.
who was that? I was listening to NPR on the way in. They were talking about whoever it is that mined 50 million users' data or something.
Oh yeah.
It starts with, I forget what they call it. But anyway,
It's all over like Reddit right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
And everything. So
but they were, I guess what they're saying is that people would do these personality quizzes, and
Oh,
then they'd go in and they'd take their friend, even the friends who didn't do it, they'd get all their information.
Really?
So like if you have a friend Joe who did one of those personality quizzes, they'd go into Joe's Facebook and then link into yours and take all of your info, even though you never did the personality quiz.
Wow. So that goes beyond even like the fine print of Facebook. That's just straight up hacking, right?
Oh,
there.
totally, yeah.
Oh man, I can see what's so dirty then. All right, we
Yeah,
got started.
1 minute, and then I'll. And when he tells me time before commercial, he gives me fingers, so I'll do the finger. So when you
Alright.
see me holding up fingers, that'll let you know how many minutes are left.
All right. There we go. And that's our left. All right. That, for the whole show or just before commercial?
What's that?
Like before commercial?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
30 seconds. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Numbers on Monday 105.5 FM, part of the Wall Street Business Network. I am the host today, Mark Bellows. I am a tax professional, principal with Clifton Larson Allen, CPA firm with offices throughout the U.S. and one here in Roseville, which is where I work out of. I work with manufacturers and distributors, real estate developers and investors and contractors, and the businesses, their owners, do planning, strategy, that sort of thing. Excuse me. So I was down yesterday in Stockton for a meeting all day with the client down in that area, and this time of year is busy with tax season going on, so if you haven't filed your taxes yet, you've got about 3.5 weeks till the due date. So of course you can always extend on April 15th. This year it's the 17th or 18th, I forget. So it's the 15th on a weekend, and then Monday is Patriots Day in Boston, so it's the Tuesday. So we've got a couple days there. So you can extend your return then, but always remember extension of time to file is not extension of time to pay. So technically you need to pay what you owe, otherwise they will assess interest. But better to file and owe than not file, because then they'll hit you with a penalty for not filing. So if you have any questions about that, or you want to talk about tax situations you've got, you can always call me at my office, 916-784-7800, or you can email me, mark.bellows@claconnect.com. And this morning, my co-host is not here. I have no co-host, actually, so that's why that person's not here. Be hosting alone this week and next, at least this week, maybe next week. But I do have a guest today, and that is Robbie Rickgauer. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on the show. How's it going today?
It's going fantastic.
Good.
Lovely morning we're having here.
Yeah, right. It is a little rainy in Sacramento, as people know, so the commute was a little bit slower. But you came from downtown?
Yeah, it was a straight shot over. I think I just barely missed all the chaos that happens right there, the little Business 80 choke up right there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, and a lot of times you'd see a little bit less traffic when some of the schools are on spring break, which is around this time of year.
Mm-hmm, absolutely,
And
especially
so-
the Sac State's on spring break.
Yes.
And that's a major byway right there for I think a lot of students who are trying to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, so tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm an adjunct professor of psychology at a number of institutions here in the Sacramento Valley. So currently I'm teaching at Sacramento State University, I should say California State University, Sacramento.
We call it Sac State.
We call it Sac
Yeah.
State, but since I teach APA style writing, I have to make sure they say no, not Sac State. You have to write it out. California State University, Sacramento,
Okay.
and don't forget the comma. Anyway, CSU Sac, Sac City, and also at Sierra College, and formerly at Solano College in Fairfield too.
Okay.
Yeah, so teaching psychology, I think I mentioned already, for a number of, anywhere up to 400 students per semester, taking on 5 to 6 classes every semester. And I teach classes like introductory psychology, social psychology, child psychology, motivation, and research methods in psychology. I've been doing the adjunct gig. Adjunct is a fancy way of saying part-time.
Okay.
Doing that for about 6 years now, and it's a fun lifestyle. It's flexible, lets you have a little bit of freedom. Yeah.
So did you start being an adjunct professor right out of college?
Actually, no. It took me a few years. So I graduated in 2010. Very interesting time to graduate because the job market had massively deflated, as you probably remember, for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
So.
And where did you go to school?
CSU Chico.
Okay.
So I'm a subject of
California
and
State
teacher.
University, Chico.
California State University,
Yeah.
Chico.
So
Absolutely.
Chico State, and then and you got your psychology degree.
I did. I got my Bachelor of Arts. Actually, got a double bachelor's
Okay.
in both psychology and in French, actually. Oui, je parle français. Et toi?
You've already got too far.
I've exhausted
My
your
high school
vocabulary.
French is gone. Yeah. Oui.
All right, good. You'll get very far with that word. You need a lot of we men these days.
No.
Oh wow, you just doubled your vocabulary.
I know, and I remember you don't say vowels at the end or consonants at the end with followed by vowel.
You basically don't say the second half of the word pretty much.
Yeah.
Just cut
No.
the entire second half.
Yeah, there you go.
And so I did psychology and French. Went back in 2008 to get my master's degree. Essentially, just kind of got off the podium and walked straight back into school again. Went for my master's degree in psychological science. Got my degree there in 2010. Graduated and looked around for different jobs. Spent some time, just looking in the market. A couple of jobs that didn't really fit for me very well. Weren't really in my field at all. And then 2012, found my first teaching gig at Solano in Fairfield. Felt very lucky to actually get that job. A friend of mine pointed out to me, told me they were looking. Got my first class, 1 class. Next semester turned into 4 classes, and then I kept being hired at more places. So it ended up being a really fun thing. Something I always saw myself doing. I always knew I was going to be a teacher. I wanted to be a professor of psychology at some point. Didn't think it was going to be this early, but the job market actually really kind of dictated it was a great way to go at that time.
So do you, as an adjunct professor, do you choose your own texts to use in each of the classes?
You do. So at all the public schools, the community colleges and university, there's a lot of freedom to choose a book that you feel is the most appropriate. And some professors may even write their own books and use those too. I don't do anything nearly that complicated, but not yet. Not yet. My name did actually get published in the most recent edition of Psychology, the David Meyer Psychology book, which is one of the most widely circulated psych textbooks out there.
Congratulations. In what context was your name included?
I got to do some publication. What am I talking about here? I helped them edit it. So basically, I looked over their motivation section, and I just kind of said, "Oh, this looks great. Have you thought about including this?" And they said, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's go ahead and throw that in there. Why not?" So I usually just use some of the more popular textbooks out there. Some of the private schools, they sometimes might say you have to use this, or we can limit it to only these books.
Okay.
But generally speaking, you find there's only a few books out there that most professors tend to use. It's an interesting time, though, because more professors are leaning towards the open source or the OpenStax style books, where they're free, or students can access them either free or very, very cheap. Because in an effort to try and bring equity to the whole system, we want to try to lower the costs of things. I mean, you probably have an idea how expensive textbooks are.
Yes, we have a daughter who's in college right now, freshman at San Diego State, or Cal State University, at San Diego State, and yeah, the textbooks can be, if you buy the paper ones, are incredibly expensive. Even the e-books are still expensive.
Oh yes, absolutely. So given this is a financial show, I'm sure you know plenty about taking out a second mortgage to pay for your children's textbooks.
Right? Yes.
But yeah, now there's a lot more free textbooks out there to try and help people who just can't pay, $100, $200, $300 plus for a textbook to get themselves in there, because that can be a major source of inequity when a student is trying their hardest. They just can't afford the textbook, can't stay up with all the assignments, and then they inevitably fall behind as a result.
So have you been able to do that in terms of finding some free or lower cost alternatives for your students?
This is actually becoming something of a department-wide thing at some of the schools. We're starting to talk about adopting some of these sources, and then it comes with a bunch of quizzes and test banks and things like that. And I haven't done it yet, but it is something I've been looking at because I've been using a rather expensive book lately, and it seems like a lot of students fall behind for that specific reason. I've actually been able to look at the numbers and find that students who unfortunately don't have as much money coming in tend to have a harder time because they can't afford the book.
Okay, we are talking with Robbie Rickgauer. I would say Dr. Robbie Rickgauer. Robbie Rickgauer, an adjunct professor of psychology at a few schools around here in town. We'll continue the conversation after the break. All right.
How was that?
That was great.
All right.
How do you feel about it?
Good. Oh, good. Definitely trying to make sure I don't say, I'm about to say, oh yes, no, don't call me doctor, I still have a life.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Which is actually something I say to my students every semester. It's like, I'm Professor Rickgauer, not Dr. Rickgauer, don't have my PhD, still have a life.
So far.
Well, yeah, that's right, I don't have a family yet, so. Actually, no, that's a life in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Well, what do you guys do? You and your girlfriend do? What do you when you're not working?
Well, last weekend was a lot of fun actually. We do a lot of snowboarding.
Oh, nice.
It was a late start to the snowboarding season. We've been going since like November when there was just hard ice on the ground.
Right.
But now there's finally been some great powders.
Yes.
Last week we were digging ourselves out of like 3 feet of fresh powder.
Nice.
And then we came right back. Actually, we got snowed in up at Truckee. We couldn't leave because they shut the entire highway down.
Yeah, which they've been doing a lot this month.
Yeah, for good reason too. I mean, visibility is like 50 feet in front of you.
Crazy. Yeah.
Thankfully, she's Canadian, so she knows how to drive in the snow.
That's good.
And
she's very polite.
She is very polite, actually.
That's
She's very polite. But we came back down, and then we had this speakeasy show in San Francisco. You ever heard of this thing? It's immersive theater.
No.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Do you want to talk about this on the air?
Yeah, love to, actually.
We're back. You're listening to Beyond the Numbers on Money 105.5. Mark Bellows here, your host, a tax professional. I am, and this is that time of year, so really busy, but love doing the show here on a weekly basis with various business topics, somehow related to business. And today we're talking with Professor Robbie Rickgauer.
It's not doctor. I still have a life.
Donald, but he goes by Robbie. Robbie Rickgauer, and he's a professor, an adjunct professor of psychology. Couple different colleges here in town. We've been talking about that and kind of getting into the world of the adjunct professorship. But you were saying over the weekend you and your girlfriend did a little snowboarding?
We did a little snowboarding. Went up to Truckee on the North Star. Got promptly snowed in, couldn't leave, so we had to find a last-minute Airbnb just so we could crash there for the night.
What kind of rate did Airbnb run?
Actually, that was kind of interesting. They advertise like $70, and then boom, there's a $40 cleaning fee for a room that's about as large as this entire studio right here.
Yeah.
And then Truckee's also throwing on a 12% tax for people who are just staying there. It's a way of actually Airbnb being kind of put on a level playing field with hotels. Yeah, so they're taxing them at a rate. It's still kind of above and beyond the total charge. So you get this charge like it was $124, and then there's 12% tax on top of that too. So kind of a little surprise charge right there, but honestly, we just needed a warm place to sleep. Yeah. Didn't really care how hard the bed was or how small the space was. I was just happy to.
Was this someone's house?
It was someone's house right up there, just by the 50/50 brewery. Seriously, about a block down, which is great because that's where we always go to eat. Fantastic food, amazing beer, great service too. So I'd highly recommend if you're passing through Truckee.
And were they home?
Yes, they were, but we pretty much just lived in a completely separate space. Okay. We got this nice little downstairs room, and they're all upstairs. You could hear them thumping around. They got like an 8-year-old daughter you could hear making a few noises here and there. But otherwise, it was actually pretty peaceful. They're very respectful of us.
Nice. So we're talking about the textbooks, the cost of textbooks, and how some now you're saying it's going to become departmental, whether or not you can go with a lower cost.
Well, any individual within the department can choose any book. Like you were saying before, that's kind of the nice thing is you have that freedom to do that. But because it's a new idea, and the department, especially at community colleges like Sacramento City College or Casumas River, where you have a lot of students who are have a low socioeconomic status, we know that's a concern in trying to help them succeed.
Right.
We want to do everything we can to help these students succeed, give them the tools, and if they can't afford to purchase the tools in the first place, you've kind of hamstrung the whole effort right there.
Right, yeah.
So any professor can do this, and a few of us have been messing around with it. Of course, one of the biggest things is anytime you change a textbook, you've got to change all your lesson plans to go along with it too. So it's a change of momentum,
Yes.
certain. But we're starting to realize that it's actually a great source, and because it's so kind of open to so many professors being able to add to it and contribute to the resources, we're starting to find a lot of things that are pretty equal to the major publishers' textbook resources.
Now, when you say professors can add to it, in what way? So I'm trying to envision.
So
Is it a cache of documents, if you will?
no, these are actually being organized into lessons and chapters and things like
Okay.
that. So it does have its core content all
Gotcha.
in there.
Okay.
But you can add things like these ancillary materials, as we call them, and that's a treasure trove. That's gold for any professor.
Sure.
Scrambling to put together a class. You gotta write your own quizzes, or you're gonna write all your own exam questions, and exercises. Well, that's one of the things a lot of publishers have had. It's one of their advantages is they just give that stuff to you. Hey, buy our book, adopt it for your class. Here's the quizzes written for you. Here's the test bank written for you. A lot of my students still think I write my own questions. Dirty secret there. No, I do write some of them though. But these open source books are now starting to include those. So professors can just say, hey, these have worked for me. I'm going to include this. Here's some activities you can do for this. Here's some quiz questions. Here's some test banks you can use. So going that direction is becoming a much more appealing option because it's kind of win-win. Professors get all the resources they need, and the students get to have a relatively cheap or free experience with their textbooks, so it doesn't leave them behind.
And are most departments within the colleges doing this nowadays?
They're all talking about it to some degree
Okay.
or another. Psychology is one that's, I think, very good for that, for these open source books, these free textbooks, because so many students take it, and there's a lot of kind of, it's like introductory psychology. A lot of professors teach it pretty much the same way, with a little bit of variation here and there. So it's very easy to adopt a book for such a common course,
Right.
as you could say.
Right. So you've got 3 different schools
Mhm.
that you work at right now.
Yes, I do.
presently. Do you have the same class at any of the 2?
Sometimes I'll have the same class at all 3.
Can you use the same textbook at all 3?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that's good.
Use the same textbook, use the same
Challenging,
lessons.
yeah.
And we have these that we call them learning management systems, where you have a bunch of stuff online, like quizzes and announcements and syllabi and things like that. And you can, especially now that all the schools are finally on the same system, Canvas, you can now just pick up one Canvas course that's online at one school and just copy it to another, and
Oh, that's
copy
great.
it to another.
Wow.
It's very handy for
Powerful,
me.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I gotta say. But yeah, introductory psychology, that's my bread and butter right there. Last semester I taught it 4 times at 3 different schools, and in fact there are times where it's been all on the same day. So I'm literally just hearing myself echo over and over again.
Over and over, yeah.
Oh yeah, how many times can I seriously talk about Freud and the Oedipus complex in one day? Turns out up to 4.
Apparently 4 is the max.
Yep.
Now, do you, in addition to quizzes and tests, do you also have written essays or that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, you got to have some level in which they're actually going to be doing some writing requirement. In fact, the school requires them to have some sort of writing assignment just to show that they are capable of using the English language at a college level.
Right.
Some classes it's more complicated. My research methods class, they got to do a full APA style
Oh,
paper,
okay.
and I usually have them go out and do some kind of little field research where they observe people in public and try to draw a conclusion from that. Others, it's just more theoretical. My child psychology students right now are working with something called My Virtual Child, where they raise a child online. And don't worry, it's not like they actually found a child.
It's like a Sims thing or something? Or?
Oh no, they just find an orphan and they no. It Sims-ish. Really, what happens is you log in and you say, okay, I'm gonna create a baby. And they ask you these questions, these personality questions about yourself and about your hair color and eye color and things like that. And then they produce this little virtual baby. It looks
Wow.
like this little crudely drawn 3-dimensional, 3D
Now,
saw baby.
is it based purely on the student? Do you have to choose a mate and their characteristics as well?
It is based purely on the individual student.
Okay.
So they'll throw in a few random genetic factors here. But as the students raise these children, they are asked to make certain decisions about their parenting, and they find the child actually starts to take on some personality traits of themselves. And students are shocked to find, like, wow, this kid's becoming kind of stubborn like me, or this kid's, he's pretty withdrawn, kind of like I've been. And the program does a good job of gathering those little personality factors.
Is there some artificial intelligence in the program, some AI in there?
No, that would be scary.
Yeah.
You actually got an intelligent child online. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, that is a responsibility to really put on your students right there.
Right,
Yes.
yeah.
This child, don't worry about the kid. You know, it's a consciousness and awareness. So don't worry. But it's attached to the Skynet network, so it should be completely fine.
Should be fine. So the class in that particular case is 12 weeks long, 10, 12 weeks?
16, actually.
Does the child age more than by 16 weeks during that period of time?
It does. So it only ages when you're actually looking at the child,
Okay.
when you're doing things online with the child. So it's not like a Tamagotchi where it keeps living even though it's in your pocket.
Yeah.
It's not going to wake you up in the middle of the night
That's
and
nice.
force you to feed it or change its diaper or anything like that. And my students, they always get this pang of anxiety when I tell them you're going to raise a virtual child. They're just excited, like, wow, and they think, I'm not ready for this responsibility. I say, don't worry. The child essentially just stays in cryostasis while you're not dealing with it. I actually have on my virtual child an 8-month-old who I've been experimenting with just to get the hang of the program. He's been 8 months old for about 4 years now, and he's adorable.
Great.
His name's Augie.
Augie, that's a good name.
Mhm.
So, the papers that people write, do you run those through a program to make sure they're not plagiarized? I know that, like, I've heard in high school, teachers do that sort of thing.
So there's been kind of varying access to those for faculty members. One of the great programs I've used is Turnitin.com.
Which I think some of the high schools use it.
They do, and actually when they first introduced it into our learning management system, into the place online where students turn in their papers, they would give you this little percentage factor that tells you, to what degree does the language in here is borrowed. And I was really surprised at how well it caught a few students who had literally just lifted some section out of literally like the first Google search that came up. I gotta say,
Gotta be a little more creative than that.
Oh yeah.
Let's go to page 2. Come on.
Seriously, at least go to the second one, or just look around a little bit.
You've had students that
It happens. The vast majority of my students are they are honest. That or I'm naive. One or the other. But yeah, or both. There could be a good mix in there. But generally speaking, I find that if it does happen, sometimes it's by accident. They're trying to cite a source, but then they don't do it right, or they just don't do a good job of changing the language. But most of the time that happens, it's pretty blatant, and I can mostly catch it with my naked eye, because you'll notice that their language suddenly changes.
Right.
And in a few cases, the font changes too.
Nice.
And that's just lazy plagiarism.
That's just
right there.
pure lazy. At least make the font consistent.
The
Same color and all that. Come on.
I don't know if I can actually endorse that view here on live radio. A professor giving tips on how to plagiarize.
So you run it through the program, or you read it through yourself, and you can pick up plagiarism that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Turnitin's been a great resource for that.
Is there much of an issue with plagiarism, or is it pretty much?
Well, one of the things you can do right at the very get-go is try to create a prompt that's very original for them. So some sort of writing prompt where you're not going to likely go on Dogpile or someplace like that and just find a paper.
What's Dogpile?
Dogpile, I know it was back when I was in high school. It was a place you could go to find other papers to sort of guide you, but I know a lot of students also use it to literally just grab it and just copy paste. But yeah, if you give a pretty original prompt, you find the students have to do enough of their own critical thinking that they won't have much room to plagiarize.
Right.
So thankfully that tends to take care of most of the problem there, but I'm still always just keeping an eye open. I think my naked eye does a pretty good job of catching a lot of that stuff. And then on top of that, we often have services like Turnitin to catch the rest.
Right. So how many papers do you have to look at each semester, roughly?
Depends on how many classes I have. We could be, if I have 400 students, and that's 400 papers I have to look at. My child psychology class, they have somewhere around they have 3 papers per semester. So I have about 110 of those students right now, 120 of those students right now. So you can do the math.
Yeah.
360 papers from that class.
So do you enjoy that aspect of teaching the reading of their work?
There is something very rewarding in seeing that, actually, and seeing how they've grasped the ideas I've been giving them. Because that was the one thing that really got me into teaching in the first place, was when you talk to these students about something you know so well about already, and then they start to be able to say it back and even incorporate it into their own critical thinking skills. That's just really rewarding.
Sure.
You can see how you're changing their attitudes and changing their knowledge and changing their thinking skills, and it's all demonstrated right there.
Right.
And then you got to do that, look at the papers about 300-400 more times after that.
Yeah.
So those first few, really invigorating.
Do you have a methodology where you'll read 10 or 15 at a time and then stop and take a break?
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
do you power through or what?
Yeah, I even tell my students this for their study skills too. You got to space it out, otherwise you're gonna wear yourself out, and you're gonna start getting this kind of automaticity where you might start missing things. So, like today, I have about 30 papers that I'm gonna grade, and then I can walk away from that. And it takes a little while. I should be able to do that in maybe a couple hours.
Wow.
And then I just move on, do something else, and I can come back and do another 30. It also just kind of helps you if you chunk the work into little manageable units so that you don't have to wear yourself out.
Gotcha. Well, we are talking with Professor Robbie Rickgauer here on Beyond the Numbers. He's an adjunct professor of psychology at Sac City College, at Sierra College, and of course California State University, Sacramento. Sacramento. And so we're going to take a break. When we get back, we're going to talk a bit more about the world of adjunct professorship, what you've experienced, and that sort of thing. We'll be right back.
Do I have time to go grab some water?
Yep. All right, cool. Where's that? If you go out and down, it's like the second door on the left. That's a door. I mean, it's open door.
Is there another guy in the office named Rob?
There might be. There's a lot of people here around.
Oh, it's like his guy comes around the corner, like, "Hey, Rob." Like, is he talking to me?
Yeah.
I don't think I know anyone here. And then I kind of had that moment where, like, oh shoot, is this someone that Katie introduced me to like 6 years ago, and I've forgotten? I was way
Now,
more
how
off.
have you known Katie since? Did you?
2010, actually. So I know Katie because I went to college with an old friend of hers from Quincy.
Oh, okay.
She's from
Yeah.
little tiny town, so
Yes.
everyone knows everyone there.
Yeah.
And so I met her and her then husband at a music festival.
Okay.
And then just turned out that they were living like about 2 miles away from where I was living at the time. And the time that this was like right after I graduated, so I had just moved back down to Sacramento, did not have many friends around here at all. And she was very proactive in keeping me coming out. You know how she can be. She's an incredibly, very gregarious, very well-connected person.
Very much so, yes.
And I gotta say, I was pretty grateful that there's someone reaching out to me during that period, because especially when you're looking for jobs and you're spending a lot of time unemployed, it's good to have a few connections.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she got me.
Social interaction.
She got me into like Metro Edge,
Okay, yeah.
which I haven't done for a while. I've thought about going back though, just because it's good to have a few more connections. Always good
Well,
to have
and that's a
connections.
good, young, vibrant group.
It
Metro
is.
Edge, yeah.
It is, and I like to go back at it because I didn't really understand what the group was really good for back then. Because when I was so desperately looking for a job, like anything I do has to be work towards getting a job.
Right.
But I had so little experience to showcase, and it seemed like when they're looking around for connections, I should have anything to offer. So, but to go back and see it again from a different perspective, like, hey, I've been doing this for a while. It's good to know you. And you just never know what comes from one of those connections. So
Absolutely, yeah.
it'll be good to do again.
Yeah.
But yeah, she and I have been staying in touch. It's a little tougher since she moved out to Rockland.
Yeah.
She's engaged now.
Yeah.
You've heard about that, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
It's great news.
It was Valentine's Day, right? Was it Valentine's Day?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it seems like it, yeah. So.
Yeah, I can't remember. My girlfriend kind of we kept it pretty easy for Valentine's Day. I think what did I do? Oh yeah, I bought her an orchid flower, and I think we stayed home and watched a movie.
Nice.
So that was very nice. Yeah, I mean, Katie's been a very positive influence. She's been fun to watch as she's jet-setted all over this valley.
Yeah.
You know, doing one job or another, making herself very active.
Oh, we're good.
1 minute? All right, fair enough. I looked at the recording, or the booth back there.
Yeah.
This stuff always kind of fascinates me too. I just bought my own Yeti microphone.
Oh yeah?
The USB microphone. You can
Nice.
plug it like any computer, and I'm hoping to practice a little more vocal stuff at some point. I want to try singing again at some point. So I
Did you used to sing?
Yeah, in college I was a baritone singer in the choirs there for 3 years.
Oh, really?
And I keep trying to find a group here to do it. The best one that I can find is at the university. It's always during a time I'm teaching class.
Oh,
They
so you
always
can't-
schedule it right during one of my classes, or at the end of a day of like 4 classes in a row. Like, I cannot sing at the end of this day.
Yeah.
So, love to get back into that again at some point.
Oh, cool.
And if I could ever get voice work, doing just copy and stuff like that, would be fun too. That's roll.
back. You're listening to Beyond the Numbers on Money 105.5. Mark Bellows here, your host of this fine business talk show. This morning we have Professor Robbie Rickgauer on with us.
Hello again.
Hello. Robbie, and if you want to get a hold of Robbie, by the way, you can email him at drickgauer.
It's a mouthful, yeah.
Dr. Rickgauer. It's D for Donald, first name. drrickgauer at gmail.com.
Often misconstrued as Dr. Rickgauer.
Which, again, you're not the first. It's too late to be the first Dr. Rickgauer in the family because your brother.
Yes, that's right. My brother, John Peter Rickgauer, he works over at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in Virginia doing some really amazing stuff with laser microscopy. That's always a mouthful for me. Yeah. He graduated with a degree in microscopy.
Microscopy. Is that what I said? Yeah.
Microscope stuff.
Yeah.
And he actually very large, very expensive, very impressive equipment, looking at slices of like mouse brains and things like that to see how they change through experiences. So he's also kind of in a psychology field, but more on the neurobiology side, more like the physical life science side of psychology. I talk about more of the wibbly wobbly stuff, the theories and things like that, where you can observe behaviors and develop theories from those.
So again, what are the classes you're teaching this semester?
Oh, this semester, actually this is fun because I got 5 classes in 4 different preps this semester, which means I got 4 different lessons to teach, which keeps me on my toes.
Sure.
Introduction, of course, that's just kind of your sampler platter of everything. So usually if you got a bunch of excited first-year students who love taking that class because it teaches them a lot about themselves, and they've never had a psychology class before. Most of them have never had one because they don't offer it at the high school.
So, I think every once in a while you hear about it in high school. I have, but generally you never.
Oh yeah, very rare. Usually it's just an elective too. But they find they're very interested in learning about themselves, and they say, "Oh, that relates to me. Oh, I've had a friend do that before. Oh, this and that." And I also have social psychology. That's my personal favorite. That's the
what
one.
Is that getting to?
So social psychology is how we think about, relate to, and interact with each other.
Okay.
Case in point, you're standing in an elevator, riding it up a rather tall building. You're just in there by yourself.
Right.
Suddenly, at one of the floors, before you get off, someone else gets on. How does your behavior change as a result? What things do you stop doing? What things do you start considering? How has your behavior changed? So it's human behavior and cognition, but in the spotlight of how we work with each other. Humans are inherently social creatures. We need connections, and our ancestors who did connect were stronger and survived and procreated a lot more. And social psychology says that because of that, we come hardwired to be social. So why don't we crack that open and see exactly what's going on in there? What does exactly happen when we're social? So you look at things like how much we help each other, altruism. Maybe you've heard of things like the bystander effect, where we talk about, is a person likely to get help if they, say, fall down and snap their ankle in a crowded place? And counter to a lot of beliefs, turns out the more people that are around that person who fell down, the less likely they are to get help.
Someone else.
So exactly, someone else, they can just pass the buck. They can just say, it's not my problem. Or they could say, well, no one else is reacting, so must not be an emergency. So anyways, that's social psychology. I'm also teaching child psychology.
Sure, they have the virtual child.
They have the virtual children. I have a few papers about that. I also do motivation psychology, which is about just what does motivate us. Why do we do what we do? I call it the why of psychology.
Right.
And then finally, I have research methods, which is pretty much about learning the rigors of the scientific method as it's applied to psychology. So students learn how to run a study. In some cases, they learn how to run both an experiment and more of a non-experiment, like giving surveys or observing people's behaviors, not manipulating anything like that.
Right.
And they also learn how to write an APA paper, which is usually one of the most grueling things for them to do. APA style is nuts.
What does APA stand for?
So APA is the American Psychological Association, not to be confused with the American Psychiatric Association.
Very
different APA. Those are the folks who talk about mental disorders and put out the DSM every year, Diagnostic Statistics Manual for diagnosing disorders. No, this APA is all about how we gather scientific data and then how we present it, especially for the social sciences. Okay. And for students who are coming into this class for the first time, they are thinking, okay, I got this big paper to write, so I'm going to write this great, illustrious introduction. It's going to be very flowery, have lots of beautiful illustrations that people can just almost visualize. And I say, you know what? Take all that fluffy stuff and throw it in the trash. because APA is about reporting technical information. You're going to talk about what you did, why you did it, how you did it in a very step-by-step
So it's
manner.
a technical journal or something like that, so it's not going to have
Exactly.
flowery stuff.
None whatsoever, because you have to be extremely straightforward. If you did this experiment here, then you have to be able to show someone else through this paper how you did it, so they can say, I'm not sure you're actually speaking the truth. I'm going to try it and see what I can find. You need to be able to replicate it, as we say. And if your paper leaves steps out, then someone's going to, they're going to call malarkey on your paper and say, you didn't do this right, or I found something very different. What's up with that? So I try to teach them the importance of getting as close to truth as we can with science, because science is pretty much one of the best ways to gather information and try to come to a conclusion. It is the best way we have right now, and I want to show the value of that. Even if they never do another research topic, at least when they're scouring through Facebook and seeing, oh, this study shows this study shows that, they can distinguish between science and pseudoscience, and then it's straight up BS.
Be a little more critical in their approach to.
Yes, I want them to. That's something that we definitely need to be encouraging a lot more these days. Is a lot more critical thinking. We need to see students using their critical thinking a lot more.
Okay, so is that particular class there? Is that a entry level, a freshman type level, or is that a upper division? I guess upper division.
It's lower division. At the JCs, the community colleges, it's usually required for the Associate of Arts transfer degree, AAT, so they can then move over from the JC, from the community college, to the university level. It's also part of any minor and any major in psychology.
Okay.
So you don't often get the first year students, because you get a lot of students who are undeclared, unsure what they're doing. They take that intro class and they say, oh, this is fun, I never knew about this. Oh wow, I didn't know. Freud said what? That's incredible. People do this in an elevator? Oh wow, I'm gonna take more psychology classes. And then they say, okay, that's it, I'm gonna go for the major, I'm gonna try this out. We sell them on that, and then once we got them hooked, and say, all right, write this APA paper.
And then
now
you're
you're stuck.
oh yeah, I don't do that.
Yeah, so
Because I think as a business student, I'm sure I had to get take at least one psych class, intro to psych type class.
Right.
I'm sure that's what I took, but I don't remember ever like a research type class. So.
Oh yeah. Now well, it's actually the nice thing about the research class is the students in there tend to be much more attentive, much more focused, because they've gone through that first class and now they have an idea what they want to do.
Yeah.
In your intro class, you have a wide variety of students from all over
absolutely, yeah.
the entire college, the entire university. You may just be taking it for general education requirements.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I could take psychology. I heard it was fun. There's a rumor that it's easy, and that really depends from one professor to the next. I definitely can say I've had some difficult curriculums before, for sure. And then once they've passed that, they've sort of, I guess you can say they've sort of graduated up to a next level where they can take the classes a little more seriously now, because usually they've already taken a few classes, they know what it's about.
Right.
And research methods, they tend to work a lot harder. And before I had my first research methods class, before I taught my first one, an old professor of mine said, it's necessary. It's not the most, it's a little bit thankless at times, because they have to go through a rigorous process. You got to kind of break down their old way of thinking. But in the end, it can be very rewarding to see how their thinking styles have changed.
Yeah. When I got my master's in tax, I taught for about 3 semesters as one of those graduate students teaching. I don't know if you did that when you were getting your graduate degree.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, and so the first 2 semesters I taught Intro to Financial Accounting, which is a general class that a lot of people take, right? And then the last semester, third one, I did managerial accounting, which is more for people who are actually going to be accounting students. So you had a different, like the Intro to Financial could be anybody, and so you get people that weren't all that interested, all that engaged, didn't show up to class, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So how was that for you? Actually, let me ask you, how did you enjoy becoming the lecturer, becoming the professor, and standing on the other side of the room for the?
I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoy teaching, I guess. I enjoy trying to help people learn, so I liked it a lot. In that particular case, the textbook was by a professor. Everyone had to use the same textbook, basically, and they had written all the tests, so we only had to write quizzes. So, and you don't really write papers. I mean, you could write papers in accounting, but generally you don't. So it's pretty much quizzes and tests. So.
Okay. So given that you're teaching kind of these lower-level introductory courses, did you find it was interesting when you go in brimming with all this knowledge, and then you go in and these students are just blank slates?
Absolutely.
It's quite a shock, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
My first teaching experience, well, actually my first full class I took on was kind of like that. Because I walk in, I not that far off from my master's degree, I'm brimming with all this knowledge, and I've been writing complex papers and defending my entire thesis, and I walk in, and it's just right back to square one again.
Yeah.
All these students who just got out of high school,
Yes.
and for a lot of them it's their first class ever, and it was a real eye-opening moment to realize, oh man, I need to dial it back a little bit because I think I'm assuming a little too much.
Yes.
Not to say anything derogatory about these students at all, but it's a different level when you have to realize this is their first intro to psychology course.
Yeah.
They're starting over from square one.
Right, right. So you're an adjunct professor.
Yes.
And so remind our audience again what that means.
So as an adjunct professor, I teach part-time
Okay.
at several different schools. Now, adjunct professors can actually do a lot of different organizations of their work where they just teach one class and do another job on the side. That's kind of where adjuncting sort of started was, you had expertise in a field and they had need for one extra professor.
So someone like myself, they say, hey, Mark, can you come teach a tax class one night a week?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, you're an adjunct professor because I'm not a full board professor, if you will. So.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to take a break. When we get back, we'll continue the conversation about adjunct professors and what you're seeing nowadays in the market. We got there.
Yeah, I had to keep myself from getting too far into that because I saw you gave the 1 minute thing, like, oh shoot, this is a whole thing about the industry right here I'm about to get into.
Yeah, that's fine. I think this would be good for the fourth segment to cut around.
Okay, man, you're right. The time does just kind of fly by.
Yeah.
I know, seriously, this is actually pretty fun.
Well, good. Yeah.
Been enjoying this. Thanks again for
Well,
having me on.
they sell time here on the radio. If you get to a point where you want to buy $200 a week, you can have an hour show.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man, no kidding. But they're paying you now.
No.
No, okay, so you're paying.
No, I'm paying $200 a week for this show.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So what does motivate that to say, okay, I'm gonna host a show, I'm gonna talk to the people.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. One, I've gotten clients out of it.
Okay.
So I mean, that's the bottom line. Is I'm looking for new clients, right? So I've gotten clients out of it, but you can't necessarily have 52 targets a year or so. And I enjoy it. I found I really like it.
Okay.
So. We're back. You're listening to Beyond the Numbers. It is a Wednesday, a little bit rainy here in Sacramento, and Mark Bellows, tax professional, tax principal with Clifton Larson Allen. Busy time of year. As I mentioned earlier in the show, feel free to get a hold of me, 916-784-7800 or mark.bellows@claconnect.com. And today we are talking with Professor Robbie Rickgauer.
Thank you.
And we just started talking about, you're an adjunct professor, and so we kind of started just talking about like what that means to you and others who do that.
Yeah. So the adjunct professor, as I say, is someone who works part-time. And the adjunct professor works on a contract basis, which means every semester they essentially sign a contract with whatever institution, whatever school that says, I will teach this or these classes for this semester. And typically that contract only considers that one semester. It's a little bit different, the CSU system. They have a contract where they say they'll try and get you more classes over a 1 year or a 3-year period, depends on how long you've been teaching there. For the most part, you're really just going semester to semester, and you're trying to put together some classes to teach each semester. Now, as I said, the adjunct industry really kind of started mostly for people who already had a full-time job and were experts in a field, but maybe they had some free time during the day or in the evening, and they'd take on some of the extra courses. They come in, they'd share their expertise, they give they have a whole curriculum set up, they have exams and all that, like any professor does, but then they're not really using that as their sole source of income, or even their primary source of income. They have some other job on the side for that. But that all changed during the recession. So in 2008, as you know, a bunch of jobs started drying up, the opportunities appeared, and there's a lot of people who didn't have enough training in one area to stand out. It was an employer's market, and you had to go back to school to really set yourself apart. And with all these people rushing back to school to go take more classes, along came this need for more professors. The schools were not yet at the point where they could hire more full-timers, just because the economic unrest wasn't really enough money to go around to hire new full-timers and give them contracts for years and years down the road. So they found it was a much more plausible solution to start hiring these fleets of adjunct professors who could handle the load at that time. So I came into that market right around then, about 2012 with my first class, and also it was right around they passed was Prop 30 and Measure Q, which I think both helped the school system, including the community colleges.
Right.
So there's a lot more money for people to be hired for those part-time jobs. So that's how I started getting all my classes. There just was a higher demand. There was a need for adjuncts to come in and take in all these classes with all these students who were coming back and getting more training. And so now we're seeing the shift start to go in kind of the other direction.
Interesting.
Yeah, so as the market has become, as it's gotten larger, it's gotten more profitable, and more people are going back to work, there's fewer people enrolling. We're kind of seeing that in a lot of departments. Enrollment numbers are not as high as they used to be, and so not as many adjuncts are being used at this time. And for a lot of people, that means they usually will just say, okay, well, I won't be doing any adjunct work now, or I'll find some other way. But during this time, from back in 2008 to maybe mid-20 teens, you had a lot of people who started actually making a full-time living off of part-time teaching. Getting classes at this school, and this school, and this school.
Such as yourself.
Such as myself. And usually I can say I can make a decent full-time living if I have 5 classes per semester, 5 to 6 classes per semester. And I'm still getting that. And a lot of other adjuncts have left the market, so that helps me too. But it's an interesting time right now, because I gotta see each April or so and each November or so, I start getting my new class offerings, and I gotta see, how much can I put together to make next semester work out for me. There are usually other avenues. I can do things like I can work for book publishing companies, help them to put together their ancillary materials. I've done work for Sage Publishing, where I help put together their test bank, their lecture notes, their lecture slides, and activity ideas as well. And you get a little stipend for doing something like that. So that's always nice to have.
Sure.
Your amount of work is contingent on how many classes they have to offer you. And as now they're starting to hire more full-timers because they're kind of more stabilized, there's not as many classes to go around for adjuncts.
So what's the most number of classes you taught?
I had one semester actually where I managed to get 7 classes, and that was a lot of fun. That was a semester I had pretty close to 400 students.
Wow.
Thankfully, it was all classes I'd taught before, so nothing new to me. And I had a few TAs over at Sac State to help me out with that load as well. If I was to get that same load now, I pretty much would not have a social life at all.
How did they decide, or how did you get a TA versus not a TA?
Well, at the time it was a different system actually, because we could offer to any student who wanted the TA experience. But now they've changed the system where you have to actually hire the person. It's not just for college credit anymore. They have to be hired to some degree. So there's fewer of those to go around. You need to have a minimum course load. They could be teaching at least 9 units at Sac State to do that. And the community colleges don't have a system for that at all. There are no teaching assistants there really to speak of.
So you've been doing this since 2012, and you get benefits as well.
I do get
part of it.
I do get benefits, but that's not really the rule for any adjunct professor. If you're teaching 1 or 2 classes, you might have the option available to you, but it will be at some expense to yourself as well.
Sure.
Currently, because I work in the CSU system, I do get my benefits through CalPERS. And CalPERS provides that for any teacher who's teaching at least 6 units, which is, like 2 regular 3-unit classes.
Right.
Or if you have an extra large class with 120 students, that counts for 6 units. So that gets you, medical, dental, vision right there. It's the bee's knees, what can I say? Thankfully, due to a collective bargaining agreement at the community college level, especially with the Los Rios district, they've got an agreement between all their 4 colleges and Sierra College where if you have enough classes between them, I believe it's 3 classes between any of the Los Rios colleges and Sierra College, you can also get full benefits.
Is Sac City part of Los Rios?
Yes, it is. Sac City, Folsom Lake, Casumas River, and American River are all part of Los Rios.
Sierra joins in as well.
Sierra joins in kind of outside, but they're not part of the district, but they just, by virtue of being in the same valley, tend to have some agreement with them.
So what's the difference in terms of doing your job, let's say, between being an adjunct professor and I don't know what the terminology would be, a full-time professor? Or?
Yeah, full-time is fine. I mean, there's different levels. You got your assistant professor, associate professor, and then there's professor. The difference, the biggest one, of course, is that you have to, as an adjunct, find your classes every semester. You got to put together that schedule and kind of work at it yourself. As a full-timer, you are guaranteed a certain number of classes every semester, or at the very least, a certain income every semester. So you can actually rely on that. So, when I think about things like buying a house, I have to project how much money I'm going to be making in the future. And when I don't know how many classes I'm getting next semester, that becomes a bit more of a risky situation for me.
Except if this is a lender.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
I guess that's true too. On paper, it's looked like I've made a good amount of money for the past 6 years. Not a lot of money. I'm a teacher after all.
Yeah.
But I've had consistent employment during this time, and I've been very fortunate for that. So as far as they're concerned, I'm a teacher, and I get a lot of work. Boy, I hope my bank's not listening. No, it's fine. They know what I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't really know because as the market changes, it could change. I could also do fine. There may be kind of a sort of equalization, whereas more full timers come in, more adjuncts leave, and maybe I'll just be able to be that keeping that full time part timer.
So you've got your master's. Do you need your master's to be an adjunct typically?
Typically, that helps a lot. It's not a 100% requirement. If you can show that you have enough relevant experience in the field and you have a relevant bachelor's degree, then they might give you the job. So if you have a bachelor's degree and you've got, say, 10, 15, 20 years experience in the field, you can still take on a class because you're definitely an expert in that field. But the master's degree certainly helps. The PhD is, a lot of people ask me, oh, so you have your PhD then? I say, well, actually, as an adjunct, it's not required. And even for full-time work, it is not required to have a PhD. At the CSU level, it's typically not something you see. You'll have a full-timer without a PhD. It happens.
They
but
typically have PhDs.
Typically they do, yes. At the community college level, most full-timers have a PhD, but not an overwhelming majority.
Okay.
There's a lot of people who do get the job with a master's degree. I'm currently applying for one at Casunas River College, in fact. And as I said before, you got about 200 other people all flushing in there trying to get that same job. And really just depends on what they're looking for at that time.
Sure.
They may not want someone with a PhD. They want someone who actually knows the system already, who's taught in it for 6+ years, and knows how collective bargaining works, knows how shared governance works, things like that. And I'm just kind of spitballing a bunch of buzzwords here, but those are things I'm definitely going to be saying during my interview because it's one of my big advantages. I don't have the PhD, but hey, as a master's degree holder, I'm cheaper.
Yeah. So you could be an associate or assistant. What's the difference between those two?
Honestly, it's a level thing, and I can't even remember which order. I'm pretty sure associate is kind of where you first start, and then you become the assistant professor. So it is kind of a tiered thing.
Gotcha.
At that point.
So would that be the next step for you then down the line, just to become an associate? Is that what this CRC position is?
Yes, it is, absolutely. It's an associate professor position, and I'd love to be able to get it. If not, then I can keep working part-time, see what opportunities come up, and certainly it's a possibility that I can look to see what other industries might take on a professor, an experienced professor of psychology.
Right.
So always looking for new opportunities, too.
Well, good luck, and thank you for being on the show. We've been listening to and talking to Professor Robbie Rickgauer. You can get a hold of him at Rickgauer, Rickgauer at gmail.com. And this is Mark Bellows. Next week we're going to have Jeff Savage with the Sacramento River Cats on the show, talking about the upcoming season. Robbie, again, thanks for being on the show. Hope you have a great day.
Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Man, didn't even get through.
Right?
I know, I didn't get through half of my stuff. I was gonna say there are other differences between your full-timers and part-timers I didn't even get to.
Yeah, there's a lot of times when I have guests on, they're surprised at how fast the time goes.
Yeah,
because it really does go fast.